Hello, political candidates. Your campaign's website domain is an important factor in your website's SEO. It's crucial for your campaign website to include your first and last name. It gives AI models like ChatGPT an authoritative source of truth to pull from, helping to prevent the AI from hallucinating or picking up outdated information from third-party blogs or partisan attacks. So visit name.com today and buy your personalized .vote website address. Let AI be your friend. Your potential voters will thank you.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com. To run a successful business, you need one thing: customers. And how do you get customers? You get them through advertising. You get them through lead generation. But what happens if the leads don't exist or they don't have valid contact information? This is a familiar story all businesses deal with. Then they call these leads who don't exist, or they're bad numbers, or they're not in their service area. Argus 101 verifies every lead before your team picks up the phone. It's a real person in your area and a neighborhood that matches your ideal customer. Your team only calls people worth calling, thus saving you money. Free trial at argus101.com. That's ARGUS101.com. Help your business expand today. Go to argus101.com. ARGUS101.com. Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, and Sam Stone's not in here with us. We're with Elijah Norton. He's running for Arizona State Treasurer. Elijah is a self-made businessman, basically the American dream.
Yep.
Started your business with $1,000.
Yep.
Did you have the $1,000 saved, or did you borrow it?
I think it was saved, actually. Or no, I think I borrowed it, actually.
Did you really?
Friend, yeah. I can't recall. It's been so long, I forgot exactly. But yeah, I think it was a loan. It was a $1,000 loan, actually.
And did you always want to start a business?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I had thought I wanted to be a CEO of a company. And so I guess I kind of always wanted to. But, actually, I kind of debated because my dad's a lawyer and both my brothers are attorneys. My grandpa was a lawyer. So
first of all, were they disappointed you did not become an attorney?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But, it's weird because I know a lot about the law because I was raised in it. So
Sure.
It doesn't scare me like it does some people. And obviously, when you have a big business, you have to deal with a lot of complicated legal issues. So that's one thing that I was blessed to have that legal background upbringing, because it kind of my dad made me write a contract when I was 7 years old for an allowance. So weird things like that, but it helped me as a business owner. But no, I'm very glad I'm a business owner, not an attorney.
My dad had me write a contract that I couldn't get my driver's license until I got my Eagle Scout. And I turned 16. I wasn't close. I broke the contract. He let me renew it till I was 17, and I got it the last day. Okay, so you're running for state treasurer. Who is your opponent, and what separates you from her?
So I have an opponent. Her name is Catherine Haley. You know what? I was the AZ GOP treasurer before, and I've seen some bar brawls of races where people just hate each other. And I actually think she's a pretty wonderful person. I mean, we've always been very respectful towards each other off the stage and off the when we're done speaking. But she's running for the wrong race. I mean, if you look at her background, she has no background in finance. She has no background in investments. She claims she owns her own small business, but if you actually look at the small business, it's a lobbying firm. It's a glorified lobbying firm that connects nonprofits with governmental organizations. She's got some experience as a policy advisor working for John Boehner and Paul Ryan on Capitol Hill. But being a policy advisor working in a nonprofit, organization / lobbying firm. And she also serves on the State Board of Education, which is, I think, a 6 or 7 member board. And they make decisions mostly centered around educator discipline. There are a few times in a school, I guess, goes into receivership, they have to take some type of action. But she's not doing any type of executive.
And she was appointed to that, right?
She was appointed that, I think, in 2023 by Governor Ducey, or 2022 by Governor Ducey. And so, I think that she's got some education background, and she should maybe consider running for an education role. But she has no finance background, and she's admitted on numerous occasions that she has no finance background. And I can't think of anything riskier than having someone with no finance background managing $32 billion. I just can't think of any worse decision Arizona could make.
Why do you think she's running if she doesn't have that financial background?
There are some people that like to race shop, and they want to run, and they want to be a politician. And I know that before this, she was looking at running for the 1st congressional district. And when she realized that was not viable, she saw that I had no opponent, and this was a race, and she ran for this race. So I don't, the sad thing is it's going to waste resources. This is not a race that should happen. We have a actually very well-funded Democrat in the general election who could actually win. We haven't had a Democrat treasurer since 1967. And the Democrats, part of that is because voters generally trust Republicans with money more. But the other reason is the Democrats rarely ever run a serious candidate. They finally have. And he does have investment background. He owns his own private equity firm. It's bad in experience, in my opinion, but he has investment experience. So Catherine only raised, I think she's got $70,000 in cash on hand for a statewide race. That was as of the close of last quarter. We have over $1 million. And Nick's got over 700,000, the Democrat. So I don't see how in any universe she could beat the Democrat with the resources she has and her lack of experience. So we need to make sure we elect someone with finance and business investment background, which I have, and we need to elect someone that has the resources to beat the Democrat.
So with that background, explain to our listeners, what exactly does the state treasurer do?
Yeah, so the state treasurer, we have $32 billion in assets under management.
And this money comes from where?
Tax revenues. It also comes from the local government investment pool. You have the permanent land endowment trust fund. So when the state sells land, it gets deposited into this permanent land endowment trust fund. And then you have the state endowment trust fund. So you have these different pools of money. And the treasurer's job is to determine how those resources are invested, where they're invested. In the permanent land endowment trust fund, the board of investment actually makes the decision, but the treasurer is the chair and gets 2 appointees. And then the governor has the Department of Administration, the DIFI director are the other 2 that sit on the board of investment. But on the state agency investment pool and the local government investment pool, which are about $22 billion of the $32 billion, the treasurer has pretty much unilateral authority on how those assets are invested. There's statutory guidelines that they have to follow and an investments policy that they have to follow. But they have pretty much unilateral authority to determine how those assets are invested.
So basically, it's a critical position for the state that when you tell people, do you find their eyes glaze over sometimes when you mention the numbers and things?
Yes,
and they just think, Elijah's a nerd. What's he doing this for, right? So if it is run right, those funds, how much more revenue should the state treasurer be bringing to the state from the investments?
That's a great question. So, and this is, I just tell the truth. When I looked at the performance of those 2 major pools, which are 22 of the 32 billion, they've underperformed. And I mean, for example, right now we're getting about 3.7% on 22 billion of our dollars.
So does Kimberly Yee have outside advisors, or is she doing?
I don't know what she's doing. I don't know how her office operates.
She
doesn't have any finance background. She was an education chair in the state legislature. So, I don't want to talk negatively about the current treasurer. But the numbers don't lie, and the numbers say that the office is underperforming. And
how much is it underperforming dollar-wise? Let's do dollar-wise.
So if you compare us to Texas, Texas is a conservative state. They have very similar investment guidelines as we do. They're getting about 0.5% more.
Which would translate
to about $120 million a year into the state.
It's like real money.
That's real money. And here's the other thing. So the current treasurer, and my opponent, constantly brags about how the current treasurer has doubled the assets under management since she's been in office. And that's not a good statistic. Anyone who knows anything about investments will tell you, if you take $1 million and you put it into an account, it's going to double every 7 years. She's been there for 7.5 years. But there's some other things that are important too, that says this is a bad statistic. We've had 145% increase in our property tax values. We've had 450,000 people move into the state. We sold $1.9 billion worth of land. And you have the Wayfair decision, which allows cities and counties and towns to impose sales tax on interstate transactions that are purchased online. So with all of those things combined, we should have $3 to $5 billion in our assets under management than we currently do. And if you quantify that over 25 years, that's $25 billion that our state has lost out on. So our current treasurer hasn't done a bad job, because she wasn't like Carol Springer, who I think in the 90s or early 2000s lost principal.
Right.
But she has not done a good job, because we don't have the assets that we need. And Catherine's constant counter to that is, well, you're going to do risky things with our investments. She never sat down with me and asked me what I'm going to do. I've actually offered it. She's declined. And I frankly don't think she would understand me if I did sit down
That's what I
with
was
her.
thinking. She probably doesn't understand it.
But you don't need to do anything risky. I mean, for example, in those two pools, which are $22 billion, we're getting 3.7% on. I'm getting 4%. I have a liquid money market for my company. We have, I think, $5 million in that account at MidFirst Bank. We're getting 4%. I negotiated that, though. I had to go into the bank and say, listen, if you don't do this, I'm going to pull my deposits. So if you get someone that knows what they're doing, that understands how banking and finance works, you can get a better return without doing anything risky. And that's the thing that my opponent fails to understand, because, again, she knows nothing about investments or finance. And frankly, the current treasurer doesn't have an investment or finance background either.
Would you bring in outside advisors, or do you think you don't need it?
Well, I would look at the people in the current treasurer's office.
How big is the office, by
It's
the way?
about 40 employees.
Okay.
And here's another thing a lot of people don't understand. We outsource a lot of our actual trading to State Street. It's a third-party company.
Right.
We've been doing that historically for many, many years. And so when I get in there, I'm going to do a soup to nuts review of the entire office. I'm going to make sure we have the best people in there, and I'm going to make sure that we have the best partnerships, from the state servicing bank to the whoever's actually doing the investments, whoever that contract is with. I'm going to, maybe we don't outsource it, but I want to look at all the different things and make the best decisions for Arizona. You need someone that the finance background and business experience who can actually execute on that, and my opponent simply cannot.
When's the last time we had that?
Doug Ducey, I would say. And if you
That's
actually,
right, because Coldstone, because he was was he controller or COO?
he was CFO, I think.
CFO.
A CEO, actually, I believe. And, whether you like or dislike Doug Ducey, he did do a good job as treasurer.
Doug Ducey understood money.
He understood money. And then after that, you had Jeff DeWitt. I worked with Jeff when he was the party chair and I was a party treasurer. I'm not even going to talk about Jeff, but I could tell you, look, Ducey was the last real finance person we had in that office. And if you go back historically and look at it, it ran the best when Ducey was there. And since then, you really have, and this is interesting because when I had my debate with Catherine afterwards, there was an article written and Kimberly, current treasurer, commented on it. And she essentially said the treasurer should not be making any investment decisions. And that's what Catherine has said on the trail too, that the treasurer should be a steward and a glorified HR manager to hire the best people to make the decisions. And to me, that is an asinine position. The voters of Arizona are electing a leader. You should be electing someone that can lead the office and execute and manage a good team. But the treasurer shouldn't just be an HR manager that allows the deputy treasurer, a bunch of bureaucrats in the treasurer's office, to run amok. And that's what's been happening, I think. And it's going to stop if I'm the treasurer.
We have 2 minutes here. I want to talk about State Land Trust Fund. Would you explain to our audience what the State Land Trust Fund is?
So when Arizona first became a state, we had about, I think, nearly 10 million acres of land, and we've sold about 1 million of it. So there's about 9 million remaining acres. And whenever land is sold, that money is deposited into the Permanent Land Endowment Trust Fund, which is managed by the Treasurer's Office and the Board of Investment. And there was a thing called Prop 123. It was passed. I think Governor Ducey was, Treasurer Ducey at the time, I think, was instrumental in getting it passed. Maybe it was Governor Ducey. It was Governor Ducey was when he was governor. Got it passed, and basically it said we're going to pay, I think it's 6%, around 6% on the money that's we're going to distribute 6.5% to the different 33 different school district funds or school funds to help fund public education. And Prop 123 expired. The number has now gone back down to 2.5%. The distribution rate is what they call it. And this is another area where I want to criticize the current treasurer. She knew about this issue. She knew Prop 123 was going to expire, and there's been nothing done to try to do any effort to work with the legislature and get a permanent solution in place. And so if I'm elected, that's something I'm going to do. I'm going to do a pro forma. I'm going to see what the distribution rate can support, and then I'm going to to work with our legislature to enact it. But you need to have someone that understands finance and business and understands numbers to work with the legislature and lead on the issue. And there hasn't been any leadership on this issue for the past 8 years.
Quickly tell us before we go to break here, how do people find you?
They go to my website, norton4az.com. We're 41 days, 40 days left until the primary election. We are going hard. We're going all over the state of Arizona and to try to take our message to the people.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds with Elijah Norton running for Arizona State Treasurer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with Elijah Norton. He is running for Arizona State Treasurer, and we're talking about state land trust funds. Do you support selling more state lands for the state trust fund?
That I do. And this goes back to my pro forma. So when Prop 123 was originally being debated, I think it was Jeff DeWitt at the time was the treasurer, and he was opposed to raising the distribution rate that high.
And he made a big deal out of it. He was one of the first guys that really used social media for it. I remember.
Yep. Well, he failed and it passed.
Right, but he's the first guy that got. He did sort of the Spencer Pratt.
Yep.
He got the attention of Spencer Pratt, but still lost.
Yep. Well, that is a whole other can of worms. It's sad for the people of LA that you have two really bad options. You have a socialist or you have a terrible mayor.
It's what they want, sadly.
It's sad because it could be such a nice place if they just selected the right person. But that's neither here nor there. I think so. That's when I go back to this pro forma. I don't ever want there to be a situation where, like right now, we're getting pretty good returns. I think we're getting close to 9% in the permanent land endowment trust fund. The current investment strategy says 60% of the money has to be in equities and 40% has to be in bonds or bond-like, cash-like instruments. And interestingly enough, the Democrat wants to change the investment strategy to allow 80% in equities and 20% in bonds. And I think that's extremely risky and dangerous, and I don't support that. But I think that, right now the economy is doing well, but that's not always going to be the case. And so we need to make sure that if we have a bad year, there was a year in 2022, the Permanent Land Endowment Trust Fund actually lost 7%.
Really?
Yes. It lost principal because there was a negative return, negative 7% return. And so
why would that then? Explain to our
I don't
why
know.
know.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm not the treasurer. I wasn't the treasurer at the time, and that's a question for the current treasurer.
But let me ask you this question. So they lost this money in 2022.
Yep.
Does the legislature ever pull someone in after this report and said, why did we lose money last year?
I don't know. And I'm sure
it seems like they should.
They should. I don't know if they did or didn't. I wasn't, 2022. This wasn't the focus for me. But I can tell you that you're not always going to have good years, right? In investments. It's just a fact. And we need to make sure that if you average it over a 7-year period, there's going to be whatever we're distributing is equivalent to the return that we're receiving. So if over a 7-year average, maybe you lost money 1 year, you had a negative return, but then you had a really good year to counterbalance it. So as long as we are getting more than the distribution rate and a 7-year average, then we're fine. However, if we have if that math doesn't jive, then we need to either sell more land or lower the distribution rate. And that's why we need someone that can go in, and something I'm going to do on day one, because I'm tired of this issue being debated, and it gives the Democrats, frankly, an ability to shoot at us. They want to raise the distribution rate to 9 or 10%, which is, in my opinion, absolutely insane. And so, to me, it's you need to have someone that can go and do the pro forma and lead on this issue. And one of the other things I'll say about the Democrats is they constantly believe in throwing money in education. Like, we just need to fund more. We need to give more money. And one of the things I learned in business is you have to actually find the problem, the root of the problem,
right,
before you propose a funding solution. And I think the root of the problem, honestly, is waste, fraud, and abuse. I think there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the public education system.
You've seen the studies. I mean, it shows you all the money going to education. So the growth of more teachers in the classrooms like this, the growth of administrators
like that,
it just goes straight up like you're climbing a mountain. And they can never explain why the extra administrators are easy. As a matter of fact, I think Arizona is, when you take every dollar money spent on public education, we are the lowest by how much money goes into the actual classroom. I think we're at 48 cents or 52 cents. I mean, it should be a minimum 60 cents.
Well, I don't know. My understanding is we're in the bottom of educational outcomes. I think we're ranked below Mississippi now, but we're not in the bottom of funding. And so overall, and so to your point, I think that there's a disconnect between money that's going into the education system and money that's going into the classroom. And so that's why, and this is a key difference between my opponent, I want to do an audit. I want to do a comprehensive audit of the education system. I call it a Doge-style audit. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it's going to uncover a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And we have an auditor general, and I know the auditor general they've done some good work. However, they've also had some serious misses. There was a treasurer in Santa Cruz County who stole $30 million over a period of 20 years. How did the auditor general not catch that in 2 decades?
Go big, go home.
Yeah, it's so that's why I want the treasurer to work with the auditor general in the legislature and do a one-time Doge-style audit historically for the last 20 years of all of the entire state budget in the education system, because I think we're going to find a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, and it'll give us a plan on how we can fix things going forward.
Yeah, how can you fix anything unless you know what you really need and what's really being spent on?
Yep.
So as a state treasurer, you have those extensive powers to do audits.
The treasurer does not have the power to do audits as it currently sits. But I have, again, we live in a democratic constitutional republic, and I've talked to our state legislative leadership. I have over 20 former and current state legislators that have endorsed my campaign. President Warren Peterson has endorsed my campaign at the Senate. Leadership in the state house has endorsed my campaign. So I've also, my first endorsement actually was Representative Gress, who sits on, I think he's the chair of the audit committee in the state legislature, in the state house. So I've talked to all these people, and they are in favor of it. And if I get elected and we get a Republican governor, we can pass a bill through the House that gives the treasurer temporary ability to be part of that auditing team. And that's something that I'm very much in favor of. And I think the people need someone I have the experience. I audited the state party. When I ran was the Arizona Republican Party treasurer from 2023 to 2025. I ran against Pam Kirby, who's a former executive director of the party. And she had just had a bunch of scandal because there was a $500,000 election party in a bus. And I ran on auditing the state party, and I beat her 85% to 15. She got she got it handed to her because people were tired of waste and fraud, and there wasn't fraud, but waste, in this situation. And I did an audit for the first time in 10 years out of the state party, 2022 and 2023. We had a CPA sign it and certify it, and we published it for everyone to review. And we found what the theory was, that there was money being wasted by the former AZ GOP. And what we found was that was true. They had raised $6 million and spent 6% of that on voter contact. If you look at the 2024 election cycle, we raised $20 million and spent 72% of it on voter contact. And I think the results of outcomes of those elections speak for themselves.
We've got about a minute and a half left here. So if you're treasurer and you increase our returns, explain to our audience, where does that money go? So you get increased returns. Does it go back to the state? The legislature can use it as part of the budget?
It goes back into the state. It goes back into the state. It goes back into the general fund, and the state or whatever fund the return is pinged to. And the legislature can do whatever they want with it. I had one, Senator Wendy Rogers, who's endorsed my campaign, said, hey, maybe we should just give everyone in Arizona a check. It's up to the legislature what they do with it. It's my job to get it. It's the legislature's job to spend it. But it could result in maybe we could have lower income taxes, lower property taxes. And one of the things
pay down bonds.
There's a million different things we can do. But that $120 million is 0.5% more. All the voters of Arizona need to do is elect someone that knows what they're doing.
1 minute left here. Have you enjoyed running for office?
That's a mixed question.
Well, it's supposed to be.
I'm doing this because I care.
Okay.
I say this often. I mean, I have a great business. I could be sitting on a beach somewhere right now on vacation, for the summer, and I'm pounding the pavement to try to win every single vote. It's not about enjoying it. It's about what's best for the state. I'm doing this because I care about the state of Arizona, and I want to give back to the state because this state has given me a lot. And so it's time for me to do the reverse and give back to the people of Arizona.
Elijah, tell one more time how people can follow you.
My website is norton4az.com.
Elijah Norton, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back.
Dear political candidate, listen up. I'm talking to you. Your.name.vote should be the starting point of every campaign. It's memorable, looks great on signs and mailers, helps voters find you online, and gives AI tools a direct path to your campaign website. Why send people to a complicated web address when your name can be the address? Visit name.com today and claim your .vote domain.
To run a successful business, you need one thing: customers. And how do you get customers? You get them through advertising. You get them through lead generation. But what happens if the leads don't exist or they don't have valid contact information? This is a familiar story all businesses deal with. Then they call these leads who don't exist, or they're bad numbers, or they're not in their service area. Argus 101 verifies every lead before your team picks up the phone. It's a real person in your area and a neighborhood that matches your ideal customer. Your team only calls people worth calling, thus saving you money. Free trial at argus101.com. That's ARGUS101.com. Help your business expand today. Go to argus101.com. ARGUS101.com. Hello, Breaking Battlegrounds listeners. Did you know that private student loan debt in the United States totals about $300 billion? That's with a B. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, which means people are behind on payments. Why Refi, who is a proud sponsor of our show, refinances this distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't even care what your credit score is. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Why Refi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually to tailor a loan that meets your specific financial situation and helps you pay this loan off. So, folks, if you would like to learn more how to put your mind at ease and your budget back on track, call Why Refi at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. You can go and look into them at YREFI, YREFY.com to get more information. They will help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring financial relief to you as you pay off your private student loan. Jump on that website or call them today.
Dear political candidate, listen up. I'm talking to you. Your name.vote should be the starting point of every campaign. It's memorable, looks great on signs and mailers, helps voters find you online, and gives AI tools a direct path to your campaign website. Why send people to a complicated web address when your name can be the address? Visit name.com today and claim your .vote domain.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest is Don Palmer. He is the Senior Legal Fellow for Election Integrity at the Heritage Foundation. He's a former commissioner and chairman of the United States Election Assistance Commission. Don, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So, the United States Postal Service has some new regulations on vote by mail. What can you tell our audience about it? What should they be looking for? And do you feel states are going to comply with this?
Well, the Trump administration, they issued an executive order a couple of months back, and it asked the USPS to set up some regulations on how we handle mail ballots. There have been lengthy delays in the past, and there have been ballots that haven't arrived on time. And this has been a recurring issue. And as you know, just to use a first-class piece of mail now takes 7 to 10 days. That sort of length of transmission has been increasing. So the USPS issued a proposed regulation for comment, and it really laid out some rules that might be in place for the 2026 election. I'm sure there's going to be litigation, but essentially, I think that the rules were pretty good. What it does is it adds security to the mail ballots and also transparency. So there's going to have to be certain security measures attached to each mail ballot, and it's got to be uniform across the states that use the USPS, and it also has to be uniform within a state. So Los Angeles has to be treated the same as a rural county. They both have to have the same security safeguards to a mail ballot. And those transparency procedures include, frankly, looking into tracking those ballots. So not only does the office, but the voter have an ability to track those ballots through the centers that the USPS has. And so there's going to be some discussion and comment on that. I'm sure there's going to be litigation, but I think it could end up sort of improving the security of mail ballots across the country when right now there's a lot of lack of confidence in that.
We have gone to using mail-in ballots more and more across the country, but there is a big divergence between states. Some states like Colorado and Oregon are all mail-in ballots. Other states have very few people using mail-in ballots. Which of the states do you think are doing it right, and which states are really doing it wrong?
Well, I think the states that have a mail ballot upon request are doing it right. That means that you have that additional security measure where you know that there's an individual that's at the residence address and that person requests a ballot because they're going to be absent or they're sick or they're some states have over 65. So you actually are able to confirm that that person exists and that they live at the residence. I think all mail ballots and universal mail ballots where you send everyone a mail ballot, in my opinion, that's not a best policy because people have moved on. They've moved away from the resident, sometimes for a decade or more.
Right.
They may even be deceased, and a mail ballot comes there, and that's just a recipe for fraud. That's something you sort of want to mitigate, and there are some mitigating controls on that, but it's just not a best practice. And also, universal mail ballots without sort of a deadline to it. If election day is not the deadline and it goes in past that with the USPS, what you then have is the California situation in the state of Washington where results are weeks after the election, and you see the impact on voter confidence with that. It's been very negative, both frankly on the right and the left. You've had the Washington Post and New York Times say this is just not good policy. California has to reform itself.
Well, Don, since you focus on election integrity, I'm sure you've been to a lot of conferences, and we have 2 minutes left in the segment. Doesn't this stuff concern Democrats too when you meet them at conferences, or do they just? What is their excuse for it? I mean, it seems like such a common sense proposal. Say, look, your ballots are due at this date. Vote by mail could be abused unless you're cleaning up voter rolls, right? I mean, what do they say? What's their justification for their support of it?
Well, I would just say most progressive experts on the issue say that they're really trying to engage everybody with a ballot. They're trying to improve voter participation. And the reality of it is that, and we'll worry about the consequences later, or we'll make it work. The reality of it, though, is it just doesn't happen. What you have is you're going to have significant delay in results. And they will say, well, we need to be patient. Well, I came from the state of Florida. We had a couple of elections where there was delays, and the legislature said this is unacceptable. It really does negatively impact voters, which is the most important thing. And so some of these experts have just been wrong. They don't really care about the consequences of a progressive policy. And so what you have in Florida, for example, is you had deadlines that required all the results to be in by election night. And you can see how confident the voters in Florida are. Now, every 2 years, everyone's looking at California going, why can't we get the results? I mean,
Right.
Just 2 years ago, they were waiting on results to see who would be the Speaker of the House because nobody had a clue
Right.
on who was going to win because we're still waiting on California.
Yeah.
And so this is not good for the country or for the citizens of California.
No, it's not. We're with Don Palmer. He is the Senior Legal Fellow for Election Integrity at the Heritage Foundation Institute for Constitutional Government. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back to continue our conversation with Don. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We have continuing our conversation with Don Palmer. He's a senior election fellow for election integrity with the Heritage Foundation Institute for Constitutional Government. First, folks, do you or anybody you know in default on their private student loans. There's about $45 billion worth of distressed or defaulted private student loans. Well, if you are, contact YREFI at yrefy.com or at 877-400-9989. They can provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. They're not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually, tailoring your loan to meet your specific situation. They don't look at your credit score. They just can help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee an interest rate of under 6%, ensuring affordability, financial relief, and you get your loan paid off. So contact YREFI at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. We're back again with our great guest, Don Palmer. Don, so ERIC was conceived as a national system to ensure the accuracy of voter rolls by providing updates, people if they moved or if they registered in another state, etc. But less than half the states are doing this with the system. What are your thoughts on that, and how much more effective could it be if all 50 states did this?
Well, it's unfortunate. I mean, ERIC, which is Electronic Registration Information Center, I believe. I was actually in Commonwealth of Virginia at the time as a secretary, and we were one of the founding members. And the concept is great. I think they grew to a maximum of 30 or 32 states at one point. But they really had some issues that involved their board. It wasn't seen by many Republican states as a fair and balanced board. And it had an individual who was a sort of a partisan. And so many states, secretaries of state, decided not to participate in that. That is the one issue that's a concern, is that not all states are participating. And it is a nonprofit technically. And so I think that it would be great if all states participated in the program. I've said that the Election Assistance Commission should do it. It's a government agency that is designed to assist the states. I worked there for a number of years, as a commissioner and then as a chairman. And I know that other states are working with each other. And so it was concerning to me. There was this perception of politics, and some of it was real. Many states just walked away, and now legislatures has also removed states. So I hope that there's a way to a government agency could work with ERIC and sort of get all 50 states on board.
Don, it certainly looks bad when you have California taking days and days, or Arizona or other places. It looks bad. The opposition, the other side, will say, well, yeah, but it really isn't a problem. Now, we know that there is some problems. I have a friend whose dog got mailed an absentee ballot. I don't know how the dog voted, by the way. But so it does happen. But to what extent is this really happening?
Well, I think that it really impacts confidence, because if you're not careful with registration and with mailing of ballots, you're going to have discrepancies like this. And for example, would we allow this type of inaccuracy in our voting systems, the actual machines that tabulate ballots? The answer is no. The Congress saw what happened in Florida, and there was a level of Florida, and it was actually many states, that there's a level of inaccuracy. And it's the same thing with registration and with mailing ballots. If we don't know that an individual lives there, if the person may be deceased, or it may actually be a dog, that means you're not doing adequate verification. That means your systems aren't working. How can we accept that as a country, the inaccuracies of a voter registration system? And frankly, yeah.
Currently, we don't have national elections. We have a series of state and local elections. With the SAVE Act, we're going to do more, if that passes, it doesn't look like it's likely to pass, to more federalized elections. But what comes around goes around. The Democrats are going to be in control in the House and Senate and the presidency one day. Do we really want to federalize elections?
Well, I think the answer is no. I mean, I think that our system is so decentralized. It's not even really the states that run the election, it's the localities. And so that's why the Election Assistance Commission assists states and counties. That's why states oversee. And so the answer is, we have to be careful. There has to be some level of consensus on what we do at the federal level, and sort of using incentives. It's one of the reasons I wrote a story just recently on some grants that the Congress is proposing to incentivize the states to use the SAVE data program, which identifies deceased and non-citizens. It's just one example of trying to incentivize states to do the right thing. And just sort of like I spoke a little bit about the Postal Service regulations on mail voting. The USPS is a federal agency that all mail should be pretty much treated the same across the country when you think about it from the security and transparency perspective. And so I think that there are some areas of how we do elections, particularly with results, that need to be in a timely manner. It needs to be uniform. Some of the details need to be left at the states. It's where it resides under the Constitution, and giving some power to the federal government. But I think there has to be some balance, and folks need to work together to make this process work. Otherwise, we will continue to see confidence dip.
Do you see a time in our near future when online voting is possible? And would that be a positive or a negative?
Well, I think if you take a step back as a non-expert in voting, the answer is undoubtedly yes. It will be here because of just the generations of the youth that we have that are so reliant on the online for everything they do. And now, like myself, I mean, most of everything we do is online. But I think the election experts and the folks that are working elections understand that there's some safeguards that are not quite where it needs to be to develop online voting. And so once again, I think that there'll be this expectation of the public that let's have online voting. But the reality of it is we don't have the security of the voting process to do that yet. And the state and federal system haven't put in the resources to develop a program like that. So there may be expectations. There may be our life may change in the next decade rapidly. But right now, I just don't see how it's possible.
We're with Don Palmer. You can follow him on X at Voting Guy. Don, so election integrity, people talk about it all the time. When you talk to Republican candidates, it's the one question they're asked over and over at grassroots meetings, cottage meetings, and so forth. If you were king for the day, what are the couple of things you would do to put public concerns about election integrity to rest once and for all?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, number one, I would require all registrations to be verified for citizenship and identity. And if they couldn't do it on the back end with a verification program, then I would request a document of the individual, a simple document. I would also focus on some of the fundamentals. I mean, we talk a little bit about grants, proposing that states use the SAVE program. Right now, the SAVE program is for free. I would have all states do that. That's actually an existing sort of database for states and counties to verify citizenship. That's easy, that's free, and it should be used, and we shouldn't let politics get in the middle of it. The last thing I would say is I would focus a little bit more on the fundamentals of elections. We don't spend a lot of money on the bridges or the roads of elections. We focus on some of the policies like we talk about today, but voting systems need to be upgraded. Our voter registration systems, sometimes they're vulnerable. I talked to and testified to the Congress that they really need to do more testing. And those vulnerabilities need to be fixed at the state and federal level. And so if I was king for a day, I would focus a little bit more on the fundamentals and then make sure that registrations are verified for citizenship and identity, the two sort of foundational parts of a accurate registration.
Do you see or do you think that foreign adversaries have been involved or are potentially going to be involved in influencing these outcomes, tampering with our elections?
Well, I think that foreign bodies, I was a former intel officer. I mean, going back, to the 90s and even earlier, the Russians have always tried to influence our elections. My concern as an election expert is that anything that's open to the internet, Iran, China, Russia, they may try to exploit a vulnerability, maybe slow down a voter registration system or take some information. They haven't interfered to a point where they changed the ballot. But, as an election official, now I'm at Heritage, but as a former election official, I was always concerned that I certainly don't want someone trying to exploit and slow down my systems so where they don't work on election day, for example, or the denial of service. And so that means you have to do the hard work of upgrading your systems, spending money to protect them. And that's why I focus a little bit on fundamentals as we're talking here today, is I just want to make sure there's vulnerability testing of all the voting systems that we do. And I think we can do much more than we're doing currently. We're not doing everything we can. And so they may try to interfere. They may try to influence from a social media perspective, but I don't think they've had the opportunity or have changed any votes that have been cast.
Don, we've got about 4 minutes left here. I want to give our audience a little bit about your background. So you're a Navy JAG. How long were you a Navy JAG for, and what skills do you feel you learned being a JAG in the military?
Well, I mean, I was a JAG for 10 years. I basically had trial skills, both as a prosecutor and as a defense counsel. And that brings a certain skill set of actually helping people and actually talking, to a jury or to a judge. I also sort of was a counsel for a commander or an admiral or whoever the base commander would be. And basically advising that person legally of what they could and couldn't do, finding a way to get to yes. And so, being a lawyer, that's sort of what we do.
Right.
But it's also helped me in elections because you get a sense generally you're going to have counsel that can support you, but you have your own sense of your legal training that says that this isn't going to work or this might work. We're vulnerable to litigation on this. And so as a lawyer, you can, be your own filter at times. And so that's generally how being a JAG has helped me.
California is going to have on their ballot in November voter ID, and polls show that might pass. If it would, that'd be a phenomenal victory for voting integrity. What other good news is out there as you look at the various states and what's going on? What can we point to that says, all right, we're making some progress here?
Well, I think that's a potential. I think you see things in like the state of Ohio and Louisiana. They just upgraded their voter ID laws, photo ID laws. I do think that citizenship, when you really look at it, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. Now, with the SAVE database that's been improved, you could actually submit entire voting lists to the SAVE database and receive information and follow up on that and investigate. And so that what that means, and I've looked at some of the data that's come back, is that this is a perfect opportunity for localities across the country to have the autonomy to verify citizenship with a federal database for free, and that is increasingly getting easier to use. It may not be perfect, but it's getting there. And so the states now also have that ability. And so when you think about that, if we can't get a piece of federal legislation passed where there's a meeting of the minds across the board, the federal government can provide these services for free. I hope that the states across the country would use it because it's not a political issue. I think everyone wants to get citizenship verified and not place any sort of untoward burdens on the voter. If we can do that through a simple verification process or reaching out to the individual and asking for an identifying number or a naturalization document, that's not too difficult. The Supreme Court has told us that that's not considered a burden. And so that would meet the security needs, and that means everybody can register to vote, trust but verify.
Don, we appreciate having you today with us. Can you please tell our audience where they can follow your work?
Sure. They can follow me on the Heritage website. We have a number of publications that are released in the Daily Signal or other publications. You can follow me at Voting Guy. I usually publish on there everything that is out there in the public domain. So my Twitter handle is at the Voting Guy.
Don, thank you so much for joining us. We'll hope you'll join us again sometime soon. We appreciate your time. Folks, this is Breaking Battlegrounds. You can follow us on breakingbattlegrounds.vote. We'll be back next week. Have a great weekend. Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
Dear political candidate, listen up. I'm talking to you. Having an exact match domain like yourname.vote isn't a luxury, it's campaign basics. It's easy to print on yard signs and mailers, easy for voters to remember, helps people find you directly, and gives AI tools like ChatGPT a clear source for campaign information. So why settle for a long patchwork website address when you can own your actual name with a .vote domain? Visit name.com today and claim your personalized .vote website address.
Hello, Breaking Battlegrounds listeners. Did you know that private student loan debt in the United States totals about $300 billion? That's with a B. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, which means people are behind on payments. Why Refi, who is a proud sponsor of our show, refinances this distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't even care what your credit score is. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Why Refi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually to tailor a loan that meets your specific financial situation and helps you pay this loan off. So, folks, if you would like to learn more how to put your mind at ease and your budget back on track, call Why Refi at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. You can go and look into them at YREFI, YREFY.com to get more information. They will help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring financial relief to you as you pay off your private student loan. Jump on that website or call them today. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our first guest on the podcast portion is Jessica Schwab. She is a staff writer for the Washington Free Beacon, where she covers Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger's administration and higher education. You can find her on Jessica, SCHWALB, the number 7. And also you can always find her writings at the Free Beacon, Beacon, BEACON.com. As you know, it's one of our favorite publications. We always recommend you check that out daily. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you graduated from Columbia in 2024, where you had quite an illustrious career as an independent student journalist at Columbia University. Question I want to ask you, being a father myself who's had kids go to college, you majored in human rights. How did your parents feel about you getting a degree in human rights?
I don't think that they wanted to sort of dictate my line of study. They're very much whatever you're interested in. And I had actually transferred from a state university school from New York, in upstate New York, Binghamton University.
Okay.
And so I had transferred into Columbia with a very rosy outlook on what I thought I could achieve as a student. And then just in my professional career, and originally I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker.
Oh, wow.
And so that was my first sort of love of journalism. And then, as you know, the campus protests engulfed Columbia and various other schools across the nation and even the world. And I engaged with some Free Beacon reporters and was giving them intel from campus as it was on essentially lockdown, and realized that writing and reporting is more of what excites me. And so I pivoted. So I had already been sort of underway taking the classes to fulfill the major. And at that point, I just wanted to get out of Columbia.
Sure.
The campus environment was so hostile, and I knew what I liked and went from there.
Let me ask you this question. You covered these protests. What surprised you about them? I mean, what really stood out to you after watching this and reporting on it?
Certainly the double standard of student policy enforcement, I think Hamilton Hall is, of course, the example that stands out to me and probably a lot of people who are familiar with these issues, because it was just utter lawlessness. If this had been happening outside of campus, the police would have had squads of personnel there and would have, I would hope, have detained them immediately, or at least attempted to. So it was almost that Columbia and Barnard let these activists run totally rampant, almost like all across their either campus, and it was a performance. I think it was something that the university had accepted as just an event that was going to happen. It was like the inevitable culmination of these anti-Israel protesters' rhetoric and just the long campaigns of their coordination and outreach to expand their movement. And both Barnard and Columbia are pro-activist schools. They favor these, of course, left-leaning positions, but also they favor action. And I think that this stood in line with what they really believed was righteous at that moment. And they wanted to sort of let it happen and then slowly drag their feet into actually enforcing their own policies that were on the books to, I mean, they eventually did so after the federal government sort of took a bat to their knees and forced them to do that. But I think that overall it was just a surreal last semester, or second to last semester on campus, when there was just, it was as though there were no policies even on the books.
Wow. My two questions. I'm going to turn over to my co-host, Tim Mooney, here. Do you feel, I'm sure you talked to protesters, you interviewed them, or knew people who aligned with them. Did you get the sense they were open-minded to any other ideas about this particular thing they were protesting? Were they open-minded at all? None?
Not at all. And if I can just give an anecdote, a friend and I, we had been like tossing around a frisbee or a football, I can't remember what, on the one portion of the campus quad that hadn't been touched by the sprawling encampment. And two members of the encampment intentionally made an effort to leave the encampment and come out and talk to my friend and I, and started pestering us. How could we be throwing around having a recreational game next to the encampment when there's a genocide going on? And I explained to her, well, I don't think there's a genocide going on. And then she continued asking me, oh, well, like, what's your major? And she laughed when I told her it was human rights. And she said, you should pick a new major. And I said, well, why don't we just start from the beginning? And why don't we agree that Hamas is a terrorist organization and we can go from there? And I think this is almost verbatim. She said, well, I think from their perspective, they wouldn't consider themselves to be a terrorist organization. And I just looked at her and I laughed, because there's nowhere to go with that. If we can't agree on, right, like the most fundamental, indisputable premise of this conflict and who started it, then there's no way to ascend in our conversation. So
no, you're absolutely right. So you want to be a documentary filmmaker. Have you thought about doing a documentary on this, on your time there?
So I'm not sure if I'm as interested in that pursuit any longer, but I certainly had collected just like tons of footage, hours of footage. And I had been posting a lot of it to my Twitter account throughout that time. And I was really contemplating stitching it all together into a documentary, but I decided against it. I think it was because the world had already seen most of my footage, and I had sort of pivoted to this new passion of mine, which was writing. So maybe I missed out.
Maybe a book. Maybe a book.
Could be.
We'll see. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Jessica. Tim Mooney here. Great to talk to you. Question for you. Is this a loud minority on campus, or do you think that this truly infects the majority of students there?
I think it is a loud minority, but it is so loud that it sort of holds the maybe silent majority hostage to their beliefs. At these protesters' core, they operate on a extortionist, with an extortionist sort of calculus. If the university doesn't do X for us, we're going to do Y, meaning we're going to take over a building if Columbia doesn't, say, divest from Israeli academic and other institutions. So that generates this feeling of fear, and it really reverberates quite vastly. And I know that there are plenty of students on campus who literally just want to study. I ran into one good friend of mine as the protests were peaking, and he was like, I've literally been holed up in the farthest part of the campus library just studying for final exams, which is probably what everyone should have been doing at that time. But I think there are a lot of those students on campus who literally just want to get their degrees. There's a lot of engineering students and or folks who are in the science-based fields who really have no interest in joining this massive, very corrosive movement. So it's, yes, to your question, I think it is a loud majority, but it sort of forces the silent, I think it's a loud minority that sort of forces the silent majority into bending and shape-shifting to conform to the loud minority's beliefs.
You know, it was just announced this week, as we're looking towards fall enrollment for colleges, that there are several of the prestigious colleges now are having a $100,000 annual tuition. USC and others are following suit. Do you see, as a graduate of Columbia, was it worth it?
It's a question I mull over quite frequently, and I think the price tag, it probably wasn't worth it. I took some really wonderful classes at my state school that I transferred from and met some very intelligent, shrewd, driven folks over there. And I even think the professors, I mean, granted, Ivy League schools are known for their renowned set of professors, but I had one who really made an impact on me. And I think that when I got to Columbia, I was sort of expecting similar charismatic faculty to really take their time and like want to hear about your thoughts. But I feel like maybe it was the major I was in and there wasn't enough seminar focused classes, but it sort of felt like the whole project of really learning and connecting with your students, even if it wasn't a lecture class, was sort of outsourced to these TAs. And I, as much as I believe the TAs were probably competent in what they were studying, the whole point of the price tag is you're paying for the reputation of all of the professors that are on the faculty here at an institution like Columbia. So I would say if an Ivy League has a major that no other school can offer you and there's some empirical advantage to going to that school, then I would consider it a good choice. But don't be allured by this, elitist branding. I think for me, once I finished Columbia, it felt like this Ivy League curtain had been peeled back, and I sort of was able to see the actual skeleton of the institution, and it just seemed like rotted bureaucracy and people who were sort of full of themselves and maybe not for the best reasons, because it felt that after October 7th and on October 7th, if you couldn't take a stand on who was in the wrong, then to me, you lack a moral backbone.
You know, I'm a Ivy dropout, and
Is it a dropout?
it is a dropout.
Or is it an invitation?
I either left or was not asked to return, one or the other. We'll debate that separately. But my question is that, look, I mean, in my era, I'm obviously much older than you. It was a positive to have that on your resume. It was a positive at cocktail parties. It was a positive at job interviews. Do you think that, given what's now happened, particularly with Columbia, do you get pigeonholed by people when they hear that you went to Columbia?
I feel like I haven't encountered that, but maybe I haven't encountered it yet. I'm not sure. I've certainly encountered the obstacle of student loans, so more the financial side of that result. But I think if you can separate yourself, and I feel like I was lucky enough to have plenty of opportunities to do so just in terms of reporting and commentating on the evildoers and the people who are trying to stand for lawfulness on campus and just general civility. You don't have to agree with every position on the, say, pro-Israel side or the anti-Israel side, but just to be open-minded. So I think that if you can individualize yourself, if you're going to an institution that has a reputation for being far left or even just left-leaning, that would be maybe a point in your favor, because it shows how you're not cowed by what the majority thinks on campus. And so that could speak to your courageousness and willingness to take a stand and pave your own pathway as a student and as a person.
So years in the future, if Columbia hasn't changed, if the Ivies haven't changed, and you had a daughter who was looking towards college, would you encourage her, discourage her from going to Columbia or one of the Ivies?
It's a good question. I think with that, there's so much incomplete information.
Right.
But if we're working within the conditions of how Columbia behaves now and the Ivy Leagues behave now, I would encourage my daughter or my son, whomever, to think about what really drives them. What field do they just want to constantly read about? And I remember I even had a high school teacher who gave me this great quote. He would always ask us, "Where are you nerdiest?" And
that's great.
That's a good one.
Right? It's wonderful because it just captures that it's about what lights your fire, essentially. And so if Columbia or Harvard has some major or some faculty member whose writings you can't get enough of, and that is the only thing that's going to make you happy. I think students, when they're applying out of high school, well, I mean, maybe when I was applying to colleges out of high school, it was coming out of the COVID pandemic lockdowns. So things were sort of all over the place. But when I was picking my major, it felt, I had a gut feeling that, okay, this is where I could see myself going. I wanted to make the world a better place, and I still do, but maybe in a different field. So I think that if students can really reflect on what drives them at their core and pursue whatever resources and institutions can nurture that, that's the way to go.
Well, thankfully, the Free Beacon is making a difference.
Yeah,
they are
exactly.
making an improvement.
So we're with Jessica Schwab. She is a staff writer for the Washington Free Beacon, and she covers Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger and higher education. So it was reported this week that immigration judge Angela Munson has ordered the deportation of Columbia University anti-Israel activist Mohsen Madawi. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know you covered it for the Washington Free Beacon.
Yeah, I covered some of his stories. So Mohsen Madawi, he was a student in Columbia's General Studies undergraduate school. So Columbia has two undergraduate schools. One is General Studies for like non-traditional students who are still pursuing an undergrad degree. So they're typically a little bit older. And then you have like Columbia College, which is the one I was in, and that's for like the younger, usually because you're like out of high school or you're transferring from a college. So Madawi had been the, I believe, president of the school's Buddhist Association, and I had met him before October 7th, and I had known him to be a pleasant person, and then it almost seemed that something had switched following October 7th. And he joined forces with this very aggressive movement. It started out as being aggressive, and now it's certainly violent unequivocally. And so he really took the helm of that, and he would be parading campus with a megaphone. And so he was in Vermont, I believe, in the middle of taking one of his citizenship tests when he was detained by ICE. And so then there were he was released, and then now he's been ordered to deport back to Jordan, but he has since appealed that decision, the decision. So I guess we're going to just have to wait and see to find out if his deportation will actually go through. And I think that's going to be a really gigantic, calamitous event on campus. It'll cause calamitous events on campus because, I mean, he was one of the poster children for the movement alongside Mahmoud Khalil. And so these are all very, I think, novel questions that deal with the boundaries of free speech and action, and also the rights of students who are here to study, not to wreak havoc on campuses.
Well, it's interesting what you say, though, is that he became radicalized after October 7th. My question would be did that radicalization happen within the campus of Columbia, or were there outside forces that were helping the organization of these movements?
I think it'd be inaccurate totally to say that the anti-Israel movement within Columbia's campus is sort of sequestered from all of these other outside, far more radical forces, including you have Within Our Lifetime, which is led by Nardine Kasawani, who was a student at the City University of New York, I believe in their law school. And she and the people who usually flank her in these protests, they're very radical, very pro-terror group. I mean, they see Israel sort of the way the Ayatollah sees Israel, as the little Satan. And I think would also agree that America, also how the Ayatollah sees America as the bigger Satan. So it's very interesting to take note of just how expansive the coordination of these movements are. And just because a movement is happening, on some campus, say in Vermont or some more rural area, doesn't mean that they're immune from the outreach of these more radical sections of the same movement. They're all part of the same movement. And with social media nowadays, anybody is able to get in touch with and radicalized.
Well, Jessica, our time is up. You have been fantastic. We sure hope you'll come and join us again. You've been great. Wish we had more time. Folks, you can follow Jessica on X at Jessica SCHWALB7. You can also follow her writing at freebeacon.com. Again, she covers the moderate, I'm using air quotes, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and higher education. And Jessica, we appreciate this first date. We'll hope you come on again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'd be honored to join again.
Thanks a million. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest is Tim Murtaugh. You can find him on X at Tim, last name spelled Murtaugh, for those of you from public schools in Los Angeles. Tim is a Washington Times columnist, and he's a founder of Line Drive Public Affairs. He was also a senior advisor for the 2024 Trump campaign and communications director for 2020 Trump campaign. Tim, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be with you guys. Thanks very much.
All right, we have midterms coming up. My guess right now is we keep the Senate, Republicans lose the House. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Well, I think you might be wrong on the House. I do agree that I think Republicans are going to keep the Senate, and I think there is a better than even chance that they will, in fact, keep the House. I think, 75% chance, I think, maybe, that they keep the House. Just take a look. First of all, redistricting
right. Florida
has rebounded. Yeah. Has rebounded into the favor of the Republicans in a big way. And if you look at what the forecasts are, let's go back to the first midterms in Trump's first term in 2018, according to the Cook Political Report, heading into the midterms, among safe seats, there were 210 safe Democrat seats, only 195 safe Republican seats. So the Democrats had a 15-seat edge there heading into the midterms in safe seats, with 30 seats rated as toss-ups. And remember, you only have to get to 218. So in 2018, when they did, in fact, take control of the House, Democrats needed only 8 out of 30 toss-ups to win the majority, which they did. This year, Inside Elections rates the midterms as safe seats. Republicans have 215 safe seats. That's 20 more than in 2018. And Democrats only have 206 safe seats. So the Republicans only need 3 seats, and they list 14 toss-ups. So the Republicans only need to win 3 out of 14 toss-ups in the House to retain control of the House of Representatives. And I think that is entirely doable. And I think that the issue set is going to set up in favor of Republicans once again, just as it did in 2024 when President Trump was reelected for the second time. So I am very optimistic going into the midterms, and I think the messaging is going to be a big part of it.
You know, picking up on that, the Cook Political Report announced this week the new ratings. They had 3 Republican held seats currently that were safe Democrats because of redistricting. But they had 9 Democrat seats currently being held that are in the safe Republican because of redistricting. So that's net of 6 right there. So it might be better than we might think. Where's the big surprise? If you had to point to a race anywhere in the country, said, you know, this is the one, no one's watching, somebody ought to watch this race.
Well, I think, I don't know if you would count these as surprises, but I'm going to talk about 2 Senate seats that have been in the news. Of course, the Maine seat with Graham Plattner. There's a whole lot of news. I think some excitement on the left for the Democrats, but most of it is trepidation from them. I think they once again think that Susan Collins can be gotten in Maine, and I think that the foot that the Democrats are about to put forward in Maine is going to be the spell their end in that race. And I think Susan Collins hangs on one more time.
Yes,
because I don't think you cannot paint Susan Collins as like the enemy of all mankind, which is what the Democrats are trying to do. You just can't successfully do that. It's not like the people of Maine don't know who she is already, so you can't like invent some sort of.
And they always undercount what she gets. I mean, she's usually 8 points behind in polling what she actually gets. I mean, she always underperforms in polling.
I think the surprise there will be how comfortably Susan Collins manages to hold on to that seat. And then again, I would not put this in the surprise category, but something that I am watching, how embarrassingly the Democrats faceplant in Texas once again. That's going to be another one, because they think that that James Tallarico is like this magical politician, when in fact what he really is Beto Walls. He's a cross between Beto O'Rourke and Tim Walz.
Right.
And I mean, that, my God, that is just not a winning formula in Texas, of all places, that guy. So those are the 2 that I would look out for. And I guess the big surprise would be Republicans keeping the House.
Back on Maine for a moment. The Democratic Party has until mid-July to make a replacement for Plattner. What do you think the chances are of that actually happening?
Well, I think it's pretty high that they would ditch him, but they're going to go as long as they can through this, and maybe there will one day be some story about Plattner that will cause them to jettison him. Some of the National Democrats are starting to hedge their bets a little bit and starting to let a little doubt creep into what they say about Plattner. I think even people like Ro Khanna might even decide, you know what, enough's enough. But then they'll be too far down that road, and whoever they put in there to cram into place next to Susan Collins instead of Plattner, I think that person is going to be well behind the start of the race. And so I just don't see how it's going to end up with good news for Democrats after November in Maine. And I think if we can talk for a minute about, if you don't mind, what the issues are going to be.
Yeah.
I think pretty clearly what led to President Trump's election the second time in 2024 was that he's just right on the issues that voters of America care about. Even talk about the economy, keeping taxes low, the price of fuel, the price of gas. He's right on that. Democrats, there's a headline in the New York Times just yesterday. This is the most remarkable thing. The Democrats, who are, of course, the party of climate change and doing everything possible to kill capitalism in the name of climate change, right? Here's a headline in the New York Times yesterday. Democrats once vowed to stop oil and gas. Now they're not so sure. Turns out the politics of hating oil and gas is not so great for people running for office. How about that? Who knew? And so I think that when you make the argument that what President Trump is doing is trying to rid the world of the greatest sponsor of terror on the planet in Iran, and that is what has caused the price increase of gas, temporarily a price increase for gas, I would point out. And that if you contrast that to what Joe Biden did, which was on his very first day, he targeted domestic production of energy and intentionally raised prices because the left wants to do that to drive people away from using fossil fuels. They're open about that. Suddenly they've discovered, hey, maybe that's bad politics. And the New York Times is out there helping. Hey, they're not going to talk about this so much anymore. But people know what's going on. And then, of course, we have the issues of crime and immigration, and President Trump is still on the same side as the American people are on that, and I think Republicans are going to be talking about a lot about that. And then I think here's one, you want to talk about surprises, since you raised that about the midterms. This is a surprise issue, I think, the issue of health care for Republicans as a winning issue. Democrats think that they own this issue, but I'm here to tell you that they should not believe that, because they don't. First of all, the price of health insurance is through the roof, and what it covers for those high premiums is getting worse and worse. Democrats have been in bed with the health insurers for the ages. You know, they got everything, health insurance companies got everything they wanted out of Obamacare. They got everything that they wanted out of Joe Biden's poorly named Inflation Reduction Act, trillions of dollars of taxpayer money. And what happened? The insurance system got worse. Now, what the Trump administration is paying attention to, and Republicans are as well now, are hospitals. What's happening at hospitals? The president issued a warning, the administration did, to 519 hospitals around the country, saying that they had better get on the case of being more transparent in the way that they charge patients. The president already issued that warning. This is at a time when it's now coming to light that hospitals all across the country have been fleecing this drug pricing program called 340B. It came out, it was invented in 1992. It was instituted in 1992, and it's supposed to help rural people and poor people with the price of hospital stays. And what they're supposed to do is, for example, in this program, the drug pricing program, pass on discounts that the hospitals get from the drug manufacturers, pass those on to the patients, but they do not. And in some cases, the hospitals are actually marking up, instead of passing on the discounts, marking up the much needed drugs by as much as 10,000%. $290 billion has been run through this drug pricing program. The hospitals are they're supposed to be nonprofits, most of them, raking profits, some of them raking in profits in hospitals that are built in poor areas and using the profits to build hospitals in rich areas where they can really bring the money in the bucket full. Hospital costs are up 300% since Obamacare passed, and this is something that people are starting to notice. Hospital prices are a principal driver of the overall cost of healthcare in this country, and people are starting to wake up. This is going to be a salient campaign issue, and Democrats are, again, on that, going to be on the defensive.
With Tim Mooney. He is a columnist for the Washington Times. He's also the founder of Line Drive Public Affairs. We've been talking about the midterms here. I'll tell you my one surprise state in the midterms is the Senate race in Michigan. If Democrats elect El Sayed, Rogers is going to win that race.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a really good chance of that, and Michigan can be a good state for Republicans statewide. Of course, President Trump has had success there. We've had other statewide success in Michigan, and I think that if the Democrats do, and again, here is a party that is endlessly trapped. This is so funny. This New York Times story that I just referenced, the headline to it. They are endlessly trapped by their fear and dedication to the agenda of the left. The last thing in the world that a Democrat can afford to do is fall out of step with the radical left. That's why you see politicians who heretofore had seemed at least to be somewhat normal, bending over backwards to do whatever the left. I look at I live in Virginia, my own two U.S. senators, the worthless pair, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. Mark Warner got elected 100 years ago as a U.S. senator, first promising that he was only going to serve 2 terms. But he was elected he was the NASCAR Democrat. He went around South Side and Southwest Virginia as a good old boy. And now you see him doing these in-the-car selfie videos all the time on X, and you cannot differentiate him from AOC.
No. Just
it's unbelievable.
Without the charisma. That's the problem.
I have to say, he's not nearly as handsome.
No.
As some folks think that he is.
Let me ask you a question. So you're the senior communications director in 2020 for Trump. You were a senior advisor in 2024. It doesn't seem like there doesn't seem to be any common ground anymore of Democrats. And you and I, we're all old enough in this room to say there probably was 30 years ago. Do you ever?
Yeah.
Why do you? I mean, I think there's various reasons, but I'd love to hear your reason why. And do you think it's gotten worse since the first time you helped Trump, do a campaign? Do you think it's getting? It seems like it's getting worse, frankly.
I mean, it does seem like it's getting worse. I have a hard time believing how anything could be worse than what I witnessed in 2019 and 2020, especially. I mean, if you think about what the media did to Donald Trump in 2020 when COVID hit. Now, listen, everybody understands what COVID was now. It was a global pandemic that was born in a lab in China, and it swept the world, and China created it and allowed it to escape, and it spread all over the place. That's what happened. All evidence points to it came from China. It leaked out of a lab, whether accidentally or somebody snuck it out, who knows? But it came from a lab in China, and it swept the world. CNN spent months with a body count ticker on the screen at all times, trying to tell viewers, like, this is the number of people that Donald Trump has killed up to this moment because of this disease that he invented, basically. I mean, it's insanity. They're really, truly insanity. They were trying to pin 1 million deaths on Donald Trump specifically, as though he were personally responsible for what escaped from a lab in China. It's really astounding. So I don't know. This is the 24-hour day, the minute-to-minute news cycle, that the social media. I mean, there's a lot of different factors. I really don't know. I really don't know. But the problem is the common denominator on the Democratic Party now is that whatever the extreme left currently believes will, in about 2 weeks' time, become mainstream thought across the entire Democrat Party.
Well, just look at the Iran war. 20 years ago, the initial strikes would have had an 80-90% support among the American people. I don't think it passed 50%. And I find that just so alarming that, look, I'm for spirited debate. My thoughts and beliefs are different than those on the left, but we are polar opposites. I can't think of anything I'd sort of agree with them on. I'm not even sure they like kids.
Well, talking about kids.
I know. Everything is politics to them. I mean, everything.
It's a religion.
Honest to God, you can't.
It's a religion.
You truly can't. You can't go to a baseball game or a football game without having politics crammed in your face. Heck, you can't even watch a jeans ad and see a pretty girl draped across a Mustang or something, because God knows they'll make that political. Poor Sydney Sweeney. My goodness. I mean, she became a pinata for the left just because she had that went back to the fuel, oil and gas thing again. They can't stand muscle cars. They can't stand an actual woman.
Tim, you're a PR guy, though. You have to love what Sydney Sweeney did. She basically gave the middle finger to everybody. It was.
She knew what the reaction was.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable, and it's a lesson for everybody to learn to just ignore the noise.
Right. Exactly right. This is why if you look at the things that hit you in the face, that you realize, my gosh, some people just really, truly don't get it. Like what Jaguar did not too long ago with changing its entire branding. You cannot get a gas-powered Jaguar, a new one, anymore. They don't make them.
No.
They don't make them anymore.
Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you, I had a Jaguar, the sports car, and it was a pretty sports car. It looked like an Aston Martin, and I loved it.
Oh, I love Jaguars.
And I went in to go get it serviced, and there were no more Jaguars in the showrooms. And I asked the guy that owned the station, I go, what happened? He goes, oh, we'll service your Jaguar. I'm not selling them anymore. They try to force everybody just to do these EVs, and he goes, no one's buying EVs. I'm not going to make my shop an EV shop. I'm not going to do it. I told them I will promise to continue to provide service. If you want it, you got to go out to the west side of Phoenix. So it was just, they came in and forced it, and Jaguar's been hit hard. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, there was 1 month, I couldn't believe this. In the continent of Europe, there was 1 month 2 summers ago where Jaguar did not sell a single new vehicle. Not one. In the entire continent of Europe, not one new Jaguar sold it for an entire month. And Ferrari just made the same mistake.
I know.
They come out with this monster $650,000 electric Ferrari. It looks like a Ford Taurus.
Know your audience. Know your
What are you
audience,
doing?
Ferrari. Know your audience, right? No one's looking for an EV for a Ferrari. They want.
Meanwhile,
speed
they
and-
hate Elon Musk now. All of us. They used to think he was a genius. The number of people I see, I live in Loudoun County, Virginia. The number of people I see driving around with a Tesla with a bumper sticker on it that says, "Don't blame me. I bought this before he went nuts," or something stupid like that. I mean, it's so funny. So it's obvious you're admitting that you bought this electric car to promote your what's the word? It's a purity test. It's proof of purity.
Right.
You bought this Tesla to prove your pureness. And now you have to have a bumper sticker to prove that you're still poor and that you got duped the first time. I mean, your virtue signaling didn't work out, so you're using the same vehicle to virtue signal in a different direction. If it's that important to you, trade it in. Trade it in.
Exactly. I have one last question before we let you go, and I wanted to get to your Washington Times piece, but we're going to come back another time on that.
Okay.
So you prepared speeches for Donald Trump.
Well, no, I was not one of the speechwriters.
Okay,
No.
but as a communications director, how often does he deviate from prepared remarks? What percentage?
What percentage of speeches?
Well, no,
100% of the speeches.
And they just sort of accept it now, right? It's like it is what it is.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. He even talks about it. He calls it the weed. Let's say if you go into a Trump rally. And the speech is the speech that's on the teleprompter is, when printed, about 8 pages long, right? Mm-hmm. That is a speech that should not take an hour and a half to get right. It's a pretty short speech. But he'll go up there on stage and he'll just riff for minutes at a time, and then come back to the text, and then riff some more, and then come back to the text, and he sends himself out. He calls it the weave, and he always returns to the text and to the argument, and it does actually work. The entirety of a Donald Trump speech is a complete narrative. It really truly is, and he calls it the hard. I swear, one of the hardest jobs in politics today is being the teleprompter operator for Donald Trump. It is, because you got to know where to stop. And you got to know when to pick it back up again, because you're sitting there with that controller where you control whether the words move or not. And you got to follow, man. The one who's listening, as the person who is listening to the president most closely is the teleprompter operator. I guarantee you that, because he needs to know when the president's bringing it back in for a landing.
Tim Murtaugh,
which he always does.
He always does.
You got to pay attention.
He brings it in. Tim Murtaugh, tell people how they follow you.
You can follow me on X's, where I primarily do stuff in public. It's at Tim Murtaugh, TimMurtaugh, and also I write a column every 2 weeks in the Washington Times every other Thursday. So I appreciate that. Thank you,
Tim. Thank you for joining us. We'll hope you'll join us again sometime soon.
You bet. It's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Murtaugh, thanks a million. This is Breaking Battlegrounds, and now we go to B's Corner. B, what do we got this week?
Mystery, secrets untold. The truth gets set free when B gets a hold. Crimes where killers roam off free, or even ones where they get caught at the scene. From cold case files to headline news, she's breaking it all down just for you. So come take a seat, don't miss a beat. These crime corners where the stories go deep.
All right, what do we got? What mayhem happened in the world this week?
The Carmelo Anthony case. Oh. So this is a sad one,
I'm
guys.
so irritated about it.
Yeah, there's a lot to it also, and I feel like while I was researching this case, might I add, there was a lot of indiscrepancies in a lot of people's stories from the actual case.
I'm sure.
So when you're
I think that's human nature, though. I mean, that's human nature, though. It's when you hear a story and it's gone through 2 or 3 revisions of people, the story has changed dramatically, except maybe the names.
Yeah, exactly. So we're starting here at a track meet, April 2nd, 2025 in Frisco, Texas. It was morning time. It was raining and students were gathered underneath their team tents. 17-year-old Austin Metcalf was in his tent with his Memorial High School teammates. And Carmelo Anthony, 17 at the time as well, he was a student at Centennial High School. He ended up in the Memorial's tent because it was raining. and that is where the conflict began. According to testimony, Austin and others asked him to leave. Some witnesses say Anthony refused. Some say he put his hand in his backpack. Multiple witnesses said he warned Austin, saying, "Touch me and see what happens," multiple times. And then Austin physically pushed him. Before pushing him, though, he said, "I'm not going to fight you at a track meet," but, still put his hands on him. There was multiple statements by the witnesses on whether he put both hands to shove him or if it was just like a light tap. So that was also a big part of the case, because the surveillance that pointed down towards where these tents were, that did not pick up on an exact view to see the stabbing. But there's technically surveillance of it. So after he got stabbed, he had a 3.5-inch blade in his backpack. So in the state of Texas, it is legal to carry that around, but obviously not at a sporting event, a school sporting event. And that was obviously him breaking that school policy, but it wasn't breaking any Texas policy. But the gauge in Austin's chest ended up perforating his right ventricle, and they were trying to do CPR on him, give him blood transfusions and keep everything going, but because of the gauge being so big, he just bled out and died, unfortunately. So then we get to the case of this. It was June 2025. A grand jury indicted Anthony for first-degree murder. His trial began June 2026, and after 4 days of testimony, the jury had already convicted him of murder. And they considered manslaughter, but because of his age and the act of the crime and the whole pushing of self-defense, they said no, they were going to go a different route with that. And in Texas, typically in a case like this, they would consider death penalty, but again, because of his age and them not going with manslaughter, they didn't. But another couple things with this case that really just irked me was right away, and this was some of the information that needs to be really fact-checked, but Carmelo Anthony's family immediately started a GoFundMe.
Right.
And it was a different platform. It wasn't GoFundMe, but they ended up raising $615,000. And there was rumors and talk about them using this money for a new car, a new house. The mom got a nose job. But they also defended it, saying that they needed the money for, replacement, relocation, attorney fees, because there's also an appeal that this is because of race. Because the jury, none of them were black, but they were other races. So a lot of news outlets are saying it was an all-white jury, but that's not true, because it was mixed races, but the judge did go ahead and make sure that it was a set race with the jury. So that's why there's also so much conflict and talk about this case right now.
Do you think the decision was racist?
No, I think he just was a hothead and got really ticked off.
Didn't they say there was 5 or 6 young black men who were witnesses for the prosecution on it and saw this?
He didn't have anybody on his side speaking on his behalf. They said that there were coaches, but no coaches backed him up. It was just his mom spoke on his behalf, and everybody else, there was 21 witnesses for the other side.
The divided America on this is really shocking.
Well, it goes back to the TDS, right? It's just, obviously, if he's a young black man and he's been convicted, there must be racism involved somehow.
You hear, particularly in Texas, black mothers saying, "I'm scared for my sons if they have this kind of justice." Well, if your son doesn't stab someone in the heart, I think he's going to be okay.
Even the judge said a stab is not a proper reply to a shove. It is not self-defense to a shove. That is 100 degrees worse.
And the shove, walk away.
Yeah, and he was given multiple instances to do so. So that's why they also ended up giving him 35 years to life.
Well, sadly, I would like to promise you that's the last time you'll have to cover a case like that, and the ugly term racism is thrown out when there's no racism involved. The reality is he reacted in the most aggressive manner possible. He killed a young man. And for the rest of his life, his family is ruined in a great degree. He is. And again, we get to have a bunch of people on the left claim racism when there's no racism involved. It was just plain, simple murder. So, all right, B. Well, folks, thank you for joining Breaking Battlegrounds this week. You can follow us at breakingbattlegrounds.vote. You can subscribe on Substack or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of Brennan, Sydney, our special guest Tim Mooney today, Jeremy and myself, have a great weekend.